Today I have a really cute springtime stamp set. This time I am featuring our You're the Bee's Knees, and this set has all kinds of cute bugs, forest creatures like this little snail and mushrooms, flowers, and so on. And I'm going to utilize this really cool big jar that the insects can be placed in, or your mushrooms, or your little snail and flowers, and you can create a little terrarium with them. So with that in mind, I am really going to focus on our bee today, and hence why I have my vellum, my little bee honeycomb paper, and some additional floral paper just in case. This one also features some little honeybees on it, and I'm gonna have this set aside just in case I change my mind. In addition, I have my Remarks black pigment ink, some little sequins in yellow and silver, my handy dandy tape glue runner, clear blocks, and I also have, in addition, my black embossing powder. I'm going to be embossing onto the vellum directly, and that gives it a really cool semi-transparent look to it that I think is going to really pop out. So with that said, I have my card here ready to go. I have a taller vertical aligned card that I will be showcasing the stamps on. So I think I'm just going to set some of this aside. And I want to get a better look at my floral patterns. And I'm going to just lay everything out first so that I can really see what I'm working with. So my idea is that the vellum is going to go over my initial patterned paper, and I might do only like a little vellum down the middle. That actually looks really nice with that honeycomb, kind of a nice bright yellow contrast. Or do I go in with some of these florals? Looking at that, that's also quite nice, but I think I like the simplicity of my honeycomb better, so I'm gonna stick with that. As always, I'm gonna take my glue runner, and my honeycomb. Flip that over. And cut. All right. Now I have my honeycomb. And like I said, I think I'm just gonna do kind of a thin strip and have some exposure on the sides. But before I do any cutting, let's just make sure that everything is going to fit. The rule of thumb that I'm using here is measure twice, cut once. So vellum can get expensive, and so to avoid any mishaps, let's just make sure everything is in alignment. I'm just gonna place my jar. And that's the great thing too about these clear blocks is, all right, cool. That fits pretty nice. I could probably move it more over here. And then I should have plenty of room for my phrase at the bottom, "You're the bee's knees." So, all right. And I can even use kind of this honeycomb to help me along. And I think I'm just going to go here for now. It also makes this really easy to cut because you can see all of your lines. Having some trouble with that. Turn that around. There we go. Use that. And there we go. And now I get to do the fun part. I'm gonna get my Remarks ink and have my embossing powder set aside, ready to go. And I'm going to start stamping. I'm just gonna set that aside because that is a nice bright yellow and I don't want it getting any stains on it. And I'm just gonna go in. If you don't have heat embossing powder, it really is a good idea to let this stamp settle and cure onto the paper. If you can put it in a bright sunny window, or if you can take a hairdryer and just expedite that drying process, I would encourage you to do so, because vellum is not porous like paper, so it's not going to absorb any of this ink in a quick manner. But like I said, as you can see, since this vellum isn't a porous material, it's not going to suck in those pigments from the ink. So you want to be a little careful, a little cautious. I'm trying not to get all your fingers and any transfer onto it. I'm going back in with a additional clear block to put on my You're the Bee's Knees. I'm using 3 blocks because 1, it keeps my fingers clean. 2, it's easier for me just to go boom, boom, boom and stamp quickly. And also, like I said, vellum, it's not very forgiving. So if you have a smudge or a smear, or if you have ink on your fingers, it is going to show up. So if you don't have all these clear blocks at your disposal, just really clean up your hands, wash them up, and make sure you're not going to get any transfer. I'm going to open up my black embossing powder. Oh, look at that. This is a brand new one I grabbed. So the embossing powder, since it is heat activated, it can start to stick to itself. If that happens, just give it a good shake, just like I did. You might be thinking, wow, that's a lot. And it is. However, you do want all of those nooks and crannies, all of that ink to be covered by the powder. And then crafting isn't cheap, so I caught all my extra powder and I'm just gonna pour that back in. I'm gonna set that aside. Cap this. And sometimes you can just give it a shake and that extra will come off. However, if it's being really stubborn, I'm just going to take a little paintbrush and wipe that off. All right, so I think I'm looking good. And I'm going to go ahead with my heat gun here And keep an eye out for this kind of glaze over effect that the heat embossing powder is going to react to the heat. You'll know that the powder is set when it gets this glazed look, and I will show you how. The trick is you don't want to totally hit this overly hard, because with me, for example, my vellum started to warp a little bit, and it's going to happen because the heat gun has enough to put out that the paper will start to react. However, just adhering it and kind of smoothing it out with your hands is good. But with that said, you don't want to go in right away after you've hit it with the heat gun, because this is still quite hot and a little liquidy. So just give it a little bit to cure down. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna take my card back and I can start kind of planning what I want to do. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm nice and dry from my heat embossing. Something that you need to keep in mind, the tape glue runner is going to show through the vellum. That's just how it is. The only way to prevent that is to have some additional embellishments, maybe in the corners or covering it to not show. Another way is to have the vellum wrap completely around the card so there's no glue marks. However, in this case, I'm just going to use my little foam feet and I'm going to attach those into the corners. Now, if you don't want this to pop up, I would just hit it with a little glue, just a little. And not liquid glue, but tape runner, because the liquid glue will expand and you don't want that. So if you don't have these little foam feet, a little bit just in the corners so you're not getting these long streak lines. And then I'm just gonna go in with some of my embellishments. Oh, come on. There we go. I think I'm going to do some kind of chunkier ones. And here I'm just going in with my fine line liquid glue. And I'm just going to go a teeny bit. Think back in grade school when your teacher told you just a dot, not a lot. I think maybe I'll just stick to some gold and then my white pearls. That way it's not an overload. I do like grouping my sequins and embellishments together. That way they don't look so random and a little not in focus. And then I can even go in with some of these little ones. Now, the most important part of finishing this card is to let that liquid glue dry down, give it a nice final push into the vellum, and let the product do its job. Set it aside and let it cool for about, I would say, 15 minutes, just to make sure that all that liquid glue is good to go and adhered. And if you're kind of looking at it and you're thinking, it's a little wonky, it's not quite flat yet, let the card dry, and then when you're done, get a heavy book, a dictionary, a series, something that has a good amount of weight to it, and put that on top and let that sit for an additional, I would say probably 20 minutes to a half hour. The longer the better. That way everything is just going to flatten down nicely. Or if you know a trick that you think would be helpful to help any of maybe some of these more unsightly things that can happen with card making, let us know down below in the comments. I would love to get some more tips and tricks. With that said, I'm done. I think it looks cute, it's easy, it's to the point, and it's a nice, happy, fun card. So thank you for joining us. And as always, please hit us with a hashtag stamp with us. We would love to see what you will make with our stamps. Thanks for joining.